Back in the 1980s, I was flying from West Africa to Paris with an intermediate stop in Nice. As the plane neared the airport over the blue waters of the Mediterranean, I wished I could get off right there and then, even though I had never learned to swim. A few years later, we invested our few savings in a small waterfront condo in Antibes, a few miles west of Nice, offering views from the greens of Cap d'Antibes a quarter of a mile to the right, to the old town of Antibes half a mile to the left, and far beyond. The word Provence conjures up in one's mind medieval hilltop villages and the scent of lavender. Lavender is considered there to be a holy herb and the soul of Provence. The color, texture, and fragrance of a lavender field are for many the symbol of the region. The Romans called the region Provincia Nostra, our province, which evolved into its present name. Many of its villages claim to be the most beautiful village of the region. These claims are not challenged by the other contenders. Provence is a paradise, but it has not always been a paradise. 2,000 years ago, Orange in northwestern Provence was considered a miniature Rome, but was sacked by the Visigoths in 412 AD. Insecurity in the Middle Ages and later during the wars of religion had forced the region's inhabitants to build walls, the best protection available in medieval times. They would seek refuge on steep escarpments, in some village perchés or eagles' nests high on dizzying mountain tops, to protect themselves from soldiers who ravaged the countryside when, as was often the case, they could not collect their pay. Altitude would further protect them from mosquitoes. Remains of some medieval walls have now been put to aesthetic uses. Entrance to some towns was, as for many castles, through a drawbridge crossing a stream. Beyond those entrances, narrow streets meandered around stone houses, reduced sometimes to no more than a flight of stairs, where nowadays parking is not allowed. A simple fountain was often the only source of water for the village, or for its lavoir, where a family's dirty linen is still washed in public. However, wine was always available, even if water to wash the bottle was lacking. Today, with the views they offer, hilltop villages are popular sightseeing destinations, reached by narrow, twisting roads, hoping no car will suddenly emerge from the next hairpin turn. If this introduction has tempted you to see more, let us start our stroll with a few villages of the Luberon, an area known for its good looks. The Luberon is the region immediately east of Avignon, the city famous for its 12th century bridge over the Rhone River, with a chapel standing on those piers that have survived major floods. Avignon is also famous for its palace, the largest Gothic building of the Middle Ages. A symbol of both spiritual, and military importance. The palace, overlooking the Rhone River, had been the court of 7 popes and 3 anti-popes over most of the 14th century, a period known as the Avignon Papacy, during which the administration of the Catholic Church was moved from Rome to Avignon. At the beginning of the Avignon Papacy, Pope Clement V had established his residence in nearby Carpentras in the Luberon. Construction of the Church of Carpentras started in 1409 and took 150 years to be completed. Located on a giant rock of the Vaucluse Mountains in the Luberon, the view of Gordes from across the valley is quite impressive. With its buildings clinging to a steep hill, Gordes has served as a setting for several movies. Besides its castle, the stone houses and stone-paved streets of Gordes have been a source of inspiration for artists. During the Second World War, Gordes had become an active French resistance center, for which it was later awarded the Croix de Guerre. An abandoned Village de Bory, now an open-air museum, is found a short distance west of Gordes. The Borys were dry stone outbuildings built with tons of flat stones placed one on top of the other without any mortar. Why? Don't ask me. These unusual constructions were used for sheep shelters, tool sheds, grain storage, or temporary dwelling. The nearby village of Lacoste is known for its most notorious 18th century resident, the far leftist Marquis de Sade, a proponent of libertine and aggressive sexuality, unrestrained by morality, religion, or law, hence the term sadist. Sade spent half his life in various prisons, such as the Bastille, and in a lunatic asylum. His uncle's castle overlooking extensive vineyards, where Sade spent the rest of his life, was partially torn down during the French Revolution. What now remains is owned by fashion mogul Pierre Cardin. The commune of Roussillon is located in the middle of one of the biggest ochre deposits in the world, in the very heart of the Luberon. Overflowing with the colors of old houses, displaying the various shades of ochre above the village walls, complemented by brightly painted shutters and doors, Roussillon looks as if it were conceived by an impressionist painter. The church of Roussillon shares its colors with the rest of the village. Samuel Beckett had written Waiting for Godot in Roussillon while hiding there from the Gestapo and helping the French resistance. A short and easy trail offers, against a small entrance fee, a hike through the ochre quarries spreading around Roussillon. The reddish-orange sand from which the pigment used to be extracted is great to stroll around or simply to photograph. If anything, it challenges an artist to reproduce the true colors of the quarry. If painters abound in Roussillon, so do musicians. Roussillon is the most beautiful village of Provence. The fountainhead of the Sorgue River, surging from an abyss, is the biggest spring in France and fifth largest in the world. Undersea explorer Jacques Cousteau once went searching for the bottom of the spring and was nearly killed when his air compressor malfunctioned. In the Middle Ages, a hermit was believed to have performed miracles near the source. A monastery was built there to settle monks. An impetuous torrent in spring and autumn, the river turns quiet down the stream at other times. The town of Ville-sur-la-Sorgue has many riverside restaurants facing watermills that are still functioning. But open-air restaurants, or guinguettes, are also found at other locations along the river. Canoe trips along the Sorgue River are organized between mid-April and mid-October. So much for the Luberon. At the foothills of the Alps east of the Luberon, Moustier-Sainte-Marie spreads through a wild mountain area dominated by a chapel where stillborn babies were believed to come back to life for the duration of a hasty baptism, ensuring their access to paradise. Moustier had started being built back in the 5th century as a monastery. It grew until the 13th century before being almost destroyed by warfare and the Black Plague. Fayence pottery, for which Moustier has since become famous, can be purchased today on eBay. Otherwise, you can go for lunch to an open-air restaurant built over a waterfall. Here, as elsewhere in Provence, flowers seem to grow out of every window. Well, let us say, not every window. The Gorge du Verdon is a 2,000 feet deep river canyon considered to be the most beautiful of Europe. It starts at Castellane and the wild surroundings of the Alpes d'Haute-Provence. It ends near Moustier. Hiking, paragliding, and rafting are practiced there, enjoying water leaping out of the rocks. Young men also leap from those rocks. But most tourists prefer to idle time away on rented boats, allowing the Provence sun to reach every part of their body. Beyond Moustier, the canyon opens onto the Sainte Croix Lake. The hills above the lake is where much of the lavender is grown. The medieval town of Beau-de-Provence, at the foot of the Alpes, or Little Alps, was once a Protestant stronghold. Beau, spelled B-A-U-X, has given its name to the aluminum ore, bauxite, which was discovered there. The small town is crowned with a ruined castle, which, except for one of its rulers who would have prisoners thrown from its top for his sheer pleasure, was famous for the culture and chivalry of its occupants. A musketeer ambling in the streets of the town keeps that history alive for more than 1.5 million visitors every year. He might also provide some advice about local restaurants. As Beau once belonged to the faraway Principality of Monaco, the heir to the throne of Monaco still carries the title of Marquis de Beau. Beau is the most intriguing village of Provence. Starting at the source of the Gard River, a 30 miles long Roman aqueduct supplied 40,000 meters cubed of water every day to the town of Nîmes. The Pont du Gard is the most famous stretch of the aqueduct, the highest of all Roman aqueducts and one of the best preserved. Many of the stone blocks of the bridge weigh more than 5 tons each. There is no mortar involved. The stones stick together by friction, just like in the Borees. The Camargue, between the Mediterranean and the two arms of the Rhone River, is Western Europe's largest delta. Egmont, or stagnant waters, on the west side of the delta, owes its name to the salt lagoons among which it is built. Towers were erected among the swamps by Charlemagne to warn the salt workers when a hostile fleet was detected approaching. A legendary horse, Loup Drapé, was believed to stalk the ramparts of the town at night, take a few dozen children on its back, and disappear. Saint Louis IX, the French king who, like current Islamists, prohibited blasphemy, interest-bearing loans, gambling, and prostitution, had launched from there the failed Seventh Crusade, during which he had been captured in Egypt and then released against a ransom. Egmont later became one of the safe havens granted to Protestants by the Edit de Nantes. Once the edict was revoked by Louis XIV, those who refused to convert to Catholicism were jailed behind the very thick walls of the Tower of Constance. The other town of the Camargue, Sainte-Marie de la Mer, had been the site of a Celtic water goddess before the region converted to Christianity. When the Church of the Sainte Marie was built, it combined the two functions of spiritual refuge and military fortress. It had a fresh water well inside for the times the villagers had to take shelter from Viking or Saracen raiders. The three Sainte Marie, after which the church and the town are named, are the focus of devotions of pilgrims who believe that the saints had been the first to witness the empty tomb of Jesus after his resurrection and had then somehow ended up in the Camargue. But it is secular tourists who constitute the largest category of modern-day pilgrims, swelling the town's population in the summer from 2,500 to 50,000. They are greeted by musicians roving among the many bars and restaurants of the town. The Camargue has an eponymous horse breed known as the White Camargue. They are ridden by guardians, or French cowboys, who also breed bulls for local corridas and for export to Spain. Most of the horses roam freely around the salt marshes of the Camargue. Even those horses used for tourist strolls during the day are released into the wild at sunset. Shepherd dogs are sent along with them just to make sure that the horses don't disappear in the swamps like Loup Drapé used to do. Camargue is home to more than 400 species of birds. They can best be viewed at an ornithological park established just north of Sainte Marie. Many are pink flamingos. Egyptians saw in flamingos the living representation of the god Ra. In ancient Rome, flamingo tongues were considered a delicacy. In America, plastic flamingo statuettes are popular lawn ornaments. Flamingos are social birds. They live in colonies. but they form strong bonds between one male and one female. Yet, in larger colonies, flamingos, just like humans, sometimes change mates. In the early evening, flamingos from all around the Camargue, attracted by the food provided for them, converge on the park.
As a long-time inhabitant, I can tell you, the Camargue is the most beautiful region of Provence.
Don't tell me, I want to sleep. Martigues, northwest of Marseille, is built along quiet canals linking the industrialized Étang de Berre to the Mediterranean Sea. Fishermen still today spread their nets to dry on the docks of the canals. The jewel of Martigues is a small harbor in the old part of the town. It is called Miroir aux Oiseaux, or Bird's Mirror. Why that name? The walls along the harbor used to be covered with bushes, and we're told the birds nesting there were mirrored on the water. It is also said that the fishermen's houses display various colors because they were painted with leftovers of the paints used for their boats. Thus, when a drunken sailor returned home, he could recognize it by its color. Well enough, you say, but what about that special corner of Provence, the Côte d'Azur? Good question. The coastal strip of Provence owes its name Côte d'Azur to the blue waters and blue skies of the Mediterranean. Even if the blue turns to gold as the sun gets ready to set. The coast is also known in English as the French Riviera. The Côte d'Azur enjoys 300 days of sunshine per year, well protected by the Alps to the north. Days when the Mistral winds blow do not reduce the region's beauty. And even on the other 65 days, many would say the region is beautiful. As a result, however, it is also dry and subject to occasional but sometimes deadly forest fires. How climate change will affect these statistics remains to be seen. The Côte d'Azur was a remote and impoverished region until the arrival of the railway. Then it became a winter health resort for aristocrats. Queen Victoria would bring along her bed, food, and extensive entourage on her frequent visits. Tsar Alexander II would come on his private train, not this one. Since then, 90% of the world's mega yachts are believed to have visited the Côte d'Azur at least once. Fashion designer Coco Chanel made sunbathing fashionable on the Côte d'Azur. When she acquired a striking tan, tans became the fashion in Paris. Today, as the song goes, if you look, you see the people from Paris playing on the Riviera. If you look, you see the people from Paris playing on the Riviera. Boat tours departing from the small port of Cassis at the western tip of the Côte d'Azur take you along the steep-walled inlets known as the Calanque, where extensive nudist camps strain your eyes because they can only be viewed from a distance. In August 1944, Allied troops landed on the beaches of Saint-Tropez, where today tourists are idling in peace. Little more than a fisherman village struggling for its daily bread after the war, Saint-Tropez developed into a mecca for tourists once it was popularized by the movie And God Created Woman, featuring Brigitte Bardot. Saint-Tropez aligns colorful cafes along its marina, as well as a choice of various gift shops. The marina is filled in season with more than 700 yachts. Many artists work on their paintings by the waterside, hoping that at least some of them would leave Saint-Tropez on a yacht. Beyond the bleu blanc rouge of a French flag, the houses of Saint-Tropez display the ochre colors of Provence. The church steeple, which can be observed from the four corners of the marina, flaunts the same colors. The streets inside the village are relatively quiet. It is the beaches of Saint-Tropez that attract in the summer some 30,000 visitors every day. Naked? Remember, if the good Lord had meant for us to go around naked, we'd have been born that way. Saint-Tropez is the most beautiful village of Provence. As tourism became increasingly democratized, the seaside resort of Port Grimaud was built from scratch in the 1960s. Across the bay from Saint-Tropez, with canals and bridges in a Venetian manner, and restaurants of all manners. Pedestrian Port Grimaud attracts boating lovers. Visitors can rent electric and therefore noiseless boats right at the foot of a church erected in the middle of the central basin. Port Grimaud gets its name from the medieval village of Grimaud, perched on the hills above it since the Middle Ages. Grimaud, in turn, owes its name to the Grimaldi dynasty. The long history of Grimaud is inscribed in its ancient walls and its bougainvillea-flowered houses. The village is dominated by a partially restored 11th century castle, where today open-air concerts and other activities are organized. Grimaud is the most beautiful village of Provence. Further east, the Massif de l'Esterel is a small compact of mountains coming all the way down to the sea to form an abrupt coastline. The rocks by the shore are a favorite spot for Sunday fishermen, as well as for lovers of tranquil, if not comfortable, places where to enjoy a book. But it is now time for us to move to the eastern end of the Côte d'Azur, where much of the fun is. Here we are in Menton, by the border with Italy. This is where the elderly, like myself, come to enjoy a mild winter. Menton doesn't go for the ostentatious wealth of its neighbor Monaco, or the nouveau riche cachet of Cannes, further west. Instead, it throws light on its year-round lemon crop. A garden of citrus trees was created in 1725 in Menton by the Prince of Monaco for his summer residence. A lemon festival attracts every February more than 100,000 visitors. It has a different theme each year, such as in 1996, the cartoon characters Asterix and Obelix. The casino gardens in the center of Menton get decorated with real juicy lemons and oranges. Sculptures built for the occasion with more than 100 tons of citrus fruit are a smart way of getting rid of excess production. And what a pleasure the whole thing creates for a young girl under the amused look of Obelix. A pleasant drive north of Menton will lead us to high-perched villages. La Turbie, dominated by a partially restored Roman monument, is where Grace Kelly had died in a car accident. Medieval-looking Payon is perched on a peak with even higher mountains rising behind it. Further from the coast, the houses of Pay cling to the very top of a rock. And now on to another country. Francesco Grimaldi and his men are said to have captured the Rock of Monaco in 1297, disguised as monks, Monaco in Italian. But if true, this is just a coincidence, as the area was already known by that name. From their fortified palace on the rock, the Grimaldi dynasty came to rule all the way from Menton to Bordeaux-Provence. The palace, now overlooking Monaco's swimming pool and marina, has been the Grimaldi residence for the last 700 years. The Principality of Monaco is the second smallest state in the world after the Vatican. It is also the most densely populated member of the United Nations. Because of its scarcity of land, Monaco keeps reclaiming some from the Mediterranean, such as the whole Fontvieille district west of the rock, where gardens are planted on the roofs. Only 20% of its population is born in Monaco, but they all have one of the best healthcare systems in the world and the highest life expectancy. Lacking natural resources, but a playground for the rich, the semi-independent principality also boasts the world's highest per capita income and the largest proportion of billionaires who pay no income tax and only low business taxes. In other words, representation without taxation. However, it is the French National Assembly that pre-selects the candidates from which the prince appoints the head of his government. Monaco has no army, but as wealth needs to be protected, it has the highest police density in the world. In 1856, Prince Charles III had a resort built at a time when gambling was illegal in France and Italy. He named it Monte Carlo after himself. The Principality's gambling facilities, where its own citizens are not admitted, have made it a top vacation destination. Monaco's state budget is covered by the Monte Carlo casino's income. Elegant hotels and restaurants have ensured the success of the casino. The Louis XV, with its famous chef Alain Ducasse, was the first hotel restaurant in the world to be awarded 3 Michelin stars. A dinner there costs some 300 euros per person. Wine from a cellar of some 400,000 bottles further inflates the bill. Prince Rainier had focused the world's attention on Monaco when he married Grace Kelly in 1956 in the St. Nicholas Cathedral. When their son, Prince Albert II, got married, Chef Ducasse prepared a banquet for 450 guests. Unfortunately, my wife and I could not attend. The Oceanographic Museum, built at the very edge of the Rock of Monaco, features marine ecosystems. Studies conducted there were awarded the 1913 Nobel Prize. Rare varieties of exotic plants, many from the USA, Mexico, and Africa, are grown in a jardin exotique on the cliffs above Monaco. They include 1,000 species of cacti, some of which reach gigantic dimensions. While the garden was being built, a cavern was discovered under it. You need to walk down 300 steps, almost to sea level, to view it. But then, having taken your pictures, in the absence of an elevator, you have to walk back up. Back in France, the eagle nest village of Aise stands straight above the sea, halfway between Monaco and Nice along the Moyenne Corniche. With the parking lot at its bottom entrance, climbing up and down the steep streets is a feat in the summer. Even a luxury hotel with an open-air restaurant seems ready to take a refreshing plunge into the Mediterranean. Luckily, the ruins of a castle offer a nice place to take a rest and tan under the sun. At the foot of the remnants of the castle, a botanical garden displays cacti and other rare plants, looking 1,300 feet down onto the sea. Aise had been invaded by the Moors in the 10th century. During 80 years, the Moors enjoyed the most beautiful village of Provence. Baroness Beatrice Frusci of the Rothschild family had a Tuscan-style palace built about 100 years ago in Cap Ferrat, west of Aise. The villa is complemented by 9 gardens. The garden à la Française surrounds, with a touch of lavender, a replica of the Temple of Love of the Versailles Palace. The palazzo operates today as a museum with its own restaurant. The zoo created by Baroness Frusci was closed in 2011 to make space for a thalassotherapy spa, a treatment popular with the wealthy elite. Some of the animals seemed indifferent to the news. Others kept behaving in a friendly manner with the last visitors, as long as the visitors showed some compassion. But still others looked fuming with anger at the decision that had been reached behind their backs. Today, the Cap Ferrat Peninsula and its immediate surroundings continue to attract the high-income elite and have some of the most expensive real estate in the world. Villefranche-sur-Mer, a suburb of Nice facing Cap Ferrat, is so called because the inhabitants of surrounding hills had been enticed in the 14th century with a tax franchise to move to the less secure but strategically important Bayside. The people of Villefranche have since lost their tax privileges, but still hang their underwear to dry by their windows, a practice that some municipalities of France are now trying to ban. An important Imperial Russian Navy base in the late 19th century, Villefranche became the home port of the Sixth Fleet after the Second World War, until de Gaulle withdrew France from NATO's military component in 1966. The Sixth Fleet Band still performs in Nice. The Bay of Villefranche is one of the deepest harbors of the coast, a good place to go for deep-sea diving lessons. The seafront of the town consists of a sequence of restaurants and hotels employing a large part of the local population. Its interior consists of narrow streets with narrow balconies leading up to a hilltop church. The Rue Obscure or Dark Street runs under harborfront houses. It was used in the past as a shelter whenever the town came under attack. Villefranche has now become the port of call most visited in France by cruise ships. The capital of the Côte d'Azur, Nice, reached to the top of its fame in the late 19th century when it was enjoyed by various Russian tsarinas who even had three churches built there, and popularized by English aristocrats, hence the name Promenade des Anglais given to its seaside avenue. The promenade hugs the beaches for many miles, from the airport to the old port. A legend of the Côte d'Azur, the Negresco Hotel, was opened about 100 years ago by a Romanian of the same name. For VVIPs who were very, very important because they could afford the hotel even when they came with an entourage of more than 50 people. During World War I, the Negresco, lacking clients, was converted to a hospital. It is now again a leading hotel of the world. Young women display their best finery on public beaches in front of the Negresco. Other young women, such as my daughter, just prefer to sail off from the same beaches. The romantic Colline du Château was once an impregnable citadel until it was dismantled by the soldiers of Louis XIV. Its gardens can be reached by an elevator built inside a large cylinder. The hill offers on one side a view over the sea. On another side, it dominates the harbor of Nice, busy with ferries to and from Corsica and Sardinia. Castle Hill is today a favorite of brides and grooms who pose there for their wedding pictures. If some brides pose by themselves, others prefer to sit surrounded by young children, standing, sitting, or just lying on the grass. I would say to each his own photographic style. With a population of 1 million, most of Nice is a modern city. However, the old town of Nice is a hive of activity that feels like a medieval village. The ochre used for its facades must have been imported from the Roussillon quarries. Its many restaurants and cafes are best enjoyed in the late afternoon, listening to traditional tunes played on an accordion. A curbside eatery, Lupiglia Leva, offers a Provençal menu with zucchini fritters that I love. But you have other choices too in Nice. The main outdoors market in Nice is the old town's Marché aux Fleurs. It is also a fruit and vegetable market spreading along restaurants. You can enjoy there at times British musicians who have brought along their heavy instruments. The Place Masséna, the main square of Nice, just west of the old town, is used for celebrations such as the Corso Carnavalesque. February is carnival time in many parts of the world, and Nice is no exception. The 2 weeks before Lent are the occasion for parades of flamboyant and gigantic papier-mâché puppets, erected on floats that move day and night through the city at the sound of music. Let us follow the parade. Real humans also parade at carnival time, as well as in the summer. Battles of flowers have been tourist magnets since the 19th century. A simple exchange of flowers to entertain tourists at the beginning, they have now considerably evolved. During such battles, maybe 100,000 fresh flowers grown in the region are thrown by scantily but elegantly clad women to the spectators watching all along the Promenade des Anglais. And so much for Nice. Audecagne, a historical site west of Nice, is dominated by a castle of the Grimaldi dynasty. Built about 8 centuries ago, the castle, now a museum, had been subject to many sieges. Audecagne has quaint cobbled streets, some of them under arches, with stone houses that date back to the 14th century, and picturesque alleyways that have inspired many painters and writers. The village has some good restaurants, including one where you can also watch pétanque players. There is one restaurant that is even more particular, a restaurant for cats. Saint-Paul-de-Vence is another medieval village built on a rocky outcrop north of Antibes. Like most medieval villages, it is totally surrounded by walls. Long ignored, but rediscovered in the 20th century by various painters, Saint-Paul is now reborn as an art center. The old shops of its main street have been transformed into a succession of commercial galleries and artist studios. The beauty of the village has inspired many artists and painters, such as Marc Chagall, Juan Miro, Matisse, or Picasso. Marc Chagall is buried in the cemetery of St. Paul. The modern part of the village is found outside the ramparts. The works of many contemporary painters and sculptors can be viewed there at the Megd Foundation. Its collections comprise all forms of art. Giacometti sculptures are exhibited in the museum's gardens. Saint-Paul is the most beautiful village of Provence. A couple of hills away, the houses of Tourette-sur-Loup complemented the rocky outcrop that made the town easy to defend. Today, a walk in its narrow alleys offers refreshing views, while motorcyclists without crash helmets have made seashore resorts overactive and noisy. Interior towns such as Tourette, that have not yet been too commercialized, offer an opportunity for a more restful vacation, one that any cat enjoys with an afternoon nap. Tourette is the most beautiful village of Provence. The town of Grasse, north of Antibes, is considered the world capital of the perfume industry. The perfume of lavender is complemented there with that of other fragrant plants, such as jasmine, brought by the Moors, rose, or myrtle. Grasse was known in the Middle Ages for leather production, but tanning produced unpleasant odors as it relied on the use of excrements and urine. That was until a tanner realized that dipping his leather products in perfume would be the solution. The Croisette is the waterfront avenue of Cannes, planted with tall palm trees and further decorated with various little statues. It is known for its luxury hotels and equally expensive yacht clubs. Expensive cars, often with Middle East plates, are parked in front of the hotels for the strollers to gape at. The Croisette is also known for its big-name boutiques, such as Cartier or Michael Kors, the same names you can find at an American mall. Quite a contrast with the old quarters of the city. The Cannes Film Festival was launched in 1946 after having been delayed by the Second World War. The Festival Palace, which can seat 2,300 spectators, opened 3 years later. Starlets and other movie star wannabes converge year-long on the steps of the palace at the northern end of the Croisette. The Sainte Marguerite Island, just off the shores of Cannes, is most famous for the Fort Royal, where the man in the iron mask, possibly the elder brother of Louis XIV, had been held captive. Possibly inspired by the monuments of Egypt, the Marina Baie des Anges is a residential compound consisting of 4 white distorted pyramids around a boat harbor, standing almost at the entrance of our last stop, Antibes. Now, last but not least, we reach Antibes, lying across the bay from Nice, hence its name derived from the Greek Antipolis. The old structures of Antibes and the seashore rocks on which they stand create together an impressive landscape. The ramparts of Antibes surround the Chateau Grimaldi. The chateau has since become the Picasso Museum, as it houses one of the world's greatest Picasso collections. The artist, who had resided in that very building for 6 months, had donated to the museum works he had created during his stay. Picasso also lived 7 years in Vallauris, which is today practically a suburb of Antibes, where he developed a fascination for ceramics and lino cuts. He further contributed to the renaissance of the town's pottery industry. I don't think, however, that he was the one who painted the walls of Valoris. Back in the old town of Antibes, if you take a tour by foot or by trolley, you cannot miss the Marché Provençal, which offers a healthy diet of fruit, vegetables, and cheeses, as well as Provence lavender. It is complemented once a week by a flea market where you can buy books, trinkets, and clothing. And just around the corner, you might find a mime portraying a statue. The Marina of Antibes is the largest yachting port in Europe. Some of its 2,000 moorings harbor the most imposing yachts of the Côte d'Azur, flying the flags of a variety of countries. Many of the houses overlooking the ramparts of Antibes are adorned with colorful bushes. Nearby streets also display flowers of pleasant colors. Old townhouses on the waterfront exude a feeling of sunny optimism. Keeping cool on hot summer days is, however, an art in itself. The municipality of Antibes provides the water on the central square of the town, the Place de Gaulle. Modern Antibes extends west along the bay, not far from the ramparts. Standing apart from the large apartment buildings, smaller houses offer a pleasant view. Antibes beaches, one of them right in front of our terrace, features soft white sand. You can see them get rather crowded in the summer. Yet, a corner of the Plage de la Salice is still reserved for fishermen plying their traditional activities, under the supervision of a gull perched on one of the mooring posts. Even if I was not usually up and awake in the early hours when the birds take a walk on the beach, I would enjoy watching the boats in the bay once the sun started warming away the morning mist. That view changes from hour to hour and from day to day as boats sail in and out. Later in the day, sunbathing at the beach and swimming are complemented with family picnics and with beach volleyball games until the evening spreads out against the sky. The ramparts of the old town are illuminated, and if you happen to be there in July, Bastille Day is celebrated. The next morning, you may find that some young visitors, short of cash, have made their beds on the sand, possibly dreaming of the rich properties found under the pine groves of Cap d'Antibes. A mythic part of the French Riviera, Cap d'Antibes is a forest-covered peninsula famous for its waterfront villas. Unfortunately, most of those mansions are hidden from the proletarian's eye by hedges or by colorful creepers that invade their walls. Otherwise, the colors of the sailing school of La Salice are a gift for the eye of the photographer, especially when small boats designed to train young sailors align their colors along the beach. Needless to say, Antibes is the most beautiful city of Provence. And yes, Provence is a paradise.